Well, this makes it clear, doesn't it? The entire inheritance goes to your brother. The will is genuine, so stop your doubting. What? Is it really okay for us to take all this money? My husband, looking down on me, and the elated sister-in-law. The $100 million inheritance from father will be inherited entirely by my brother. I stare at the will stating this with a sense of utter despair. Have I lost everything and am stuck with this despicable man for the rest of my life? But with one sentence from my brother, everything turns upside down. My name is Catherine. I'm a 55-year-old housewife. I have no children with my husband, Robert, and we live as a couple. Robert is, in a word, a typical chauvinist. Since the beginning of our marriage, Robert's commands were absolute, and I could neither defy him nor express my opinion. My husband, 10 years older than me, has no consideration for me at all. I serve Robert like a slave, desperately doing household chores, and if there's something he doesn't like, he doesn't hesitate to verbally abuse me. Being unable to have children was also blamed on me, and I cried in secret almost every day. I wanted to divorce, but I didn't want to worry my relatives, and I didn't have the financial strength to become independent. I've been enduring and staying strong under my arrogant husband, who has a knack for psychological abuse. My only emotional support was my father. My father was once a capable businessman. He built a company from scratch and developed it into a major corporation. Although he was a workaholic, he loved my brother and me in his own way. Shortly after I got married, my mother passed away in a car accident, and my father immersed himself more in work as if to distract himself from the loneliness. It seems the overwork took its toll. My father had a stroke and was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, his life was not in danger, but he was left paralyzed on the left side. The price for working so recklessly was a massive inheritance. I persuaded my father to retire. I was worried about my father living alone, so I managed to persuade my husband, and we moved into my father's house. Once a workaholic, my father seemed to age rapidly upon retirement, showing signs of dementia, and in no time, he was bedridden and in need of nursing care. My physical and mental burdens increased dramatically. In addition to everyday housekeeping and taking care of Robert, I now had to take care of my father with dementia. Sometimes my father would lay quietly, but other times he would shout and thrash around in the middle of the night, or he would wander out of the house. I was constantly exhausted due to lack of sleep, stress, and endless hard work. Although my father was often dazed, there were times when he was clear-minded. At such times, we could have a peaceful conversation like the old times. My father often thanked me and smiled sadly, saying, "I want to leave you with as much as I can." My father passed away. This happened 3 years after I started taking care of him. Although I was relieved from the burden of care, the loss of my father, my only emotional support, left me with an enormous sense of loss and loneliness. My only hope was my father's inheritance. An inheritance of $100 million, even if split in half with my brother, would be $50 million. With that amount of money, I could finally break free from my devil-like husband. It was my only remaining hope in life. Then, a few days later, I was called by Robert and our eldest son's wife, Naomi, to discuss the inheritance. Naomi's husband, that is, my brother, has been working overseas for several years. He had returned home for the funeral but had just returned to his assignment yesterday. In place of my brother, his wife Naomi would also be present. "Your dad's will was found in the back of the drawer. It's good that it was ready for us and it wasn't sealed, so let's take a look right away." A will? I didn't know there was such a thing. I was providing care every day, but I never saw him writing a will. I wondered why my husband, who hardly cared for my father, knew about it. I had an uneasy feeling and a bad premonition. "Let's read it. All of my assets will be inherited by my eldest son, Ken. Dated April 1st, John Smith." That's it. I couldn't believe my ears. I had always thought that my father's estate would be equally divided between my brother and me. I couldn't believe that all of my father's $100 million estate would be inherited only by my brother. Whoa, wait a minute. That's strange. Why would that be? My husband handed me the will and told me to see for myself as I panicked. Indeed, it was written on the will, along with my father's signature. I immediately suspected that the will was forged. My father had a good relationship with both my brother and me, and he wasn't the type to favor only one of us. But would my kind and straightforward brother really hoard the inheritance all to himself? As I was deep in thought, my brother's wife burst into laughter. Wow! We get to keep all of his money? That feels kind of wrong. But if that's his wish, we have to respect it, right? I absolutely couldn't accept this. As I silently held the will, both my husband and my brother's wife glared at me. Hey, are you doubting this? If so, you can bring in a handwriting expert or something. Just because it's inconvenient for you doesn't mean you can go doubting it. You really have a bad attitude. I'll do that, I murmured, deciding to get the will appraised. However, contrary to my expectations, the results were that it was unquestionably written by the testator himself. I was disappointed at the shocking results and fell into despair, thinking about the past. I had devoted my life to taking care of my husband and my father. Living in fear of my husband's anger, being hurt by his verbal abuse, and being called a worthless woman was painful, but my last days with my father were happy. Even though I believed that my father cared for me too. It was more shocking and unbearable for me to think that my beloved father didn't care about me than not receiving the inheritance. I probably have to leave this familiar house and land, because they are part of my father's real estate inheritance. My dream of divorcing my husband is also now back to square one. When I told my husband about the appraisal result of the will at home over the weekend, he sneered at me with a self-righteous face. That settles it, all the inheritance goes to your brother. Don't go meddling in things anymore. The will was real. Always doubting, you worthless wife. He left the house after throwing those words. Speaking of which, my husband has been away from home a lot lately. He's been coming home from work very late, and he's often not home on weekends like this. I found it suspicious, but I didn't want to see my husband as much as possible, so I was actually relieved. Despite my husband's objections, I wanted to talk to my brother directly about the inheritance. My brother, who worked overseas, was always busy, but he was a kind and reliable person. I made sure in advance that my brother wasn't too busy, and then I gave him a call. After some brief greetings, my brother again apologized for leaving the care of our father entirely to me and thanked me for handling the funeral and various procedures. Don't worry about it. By the way, Robert, about Dad's inheritance. Was it always decided that you would be the sole heir? I tried to ask casually. It was unbearable to think that maybe I wasn't loved by my father, but I wanted to talk about it properly. Huh? What do you mean? All of the inheritance goes to me? My brother sounded surprised. I thought Naomi had told him, but it seems he was hearing about it for the first time. But the will was genuine, so the result wouldn't change. I told my brother about what happened. I see. The handwriting on the will is Dad's, and that was all it said, huh? Understood, I'll need some time to think. I'll get back to you. I'll tell Naomi not to proceed with anything until she hears from me. My brother said, ending the call. Intrigued yet patient, I waited for my brother's call. Days later, my brother contacted me. My brother had requested that I look into Naomi's suspicious activities by hiring a private investigator. He also advised me to claim my legitimate share from him. The legitimate share refers to the minimum portion of an inheritance that is guaranteed to an inheritor, and the amount varies based on your position in the family. In my case, I can claim dollar from my father's $25 million inheritance. Even with his will stating, all the inheritance should go to my brother, this legal provision would still allow me to inherit the $25 million. However, this did not sit well with my husband and my brother's wife. The decision has already been made. Don't mess it up now, they protested. However, there was more to my brother's advice. I'm not asking for the $25 million. All I want is this house, filled with memories of our father, and the land. The total estate is worth $100 million, but the real estate property is only worth $10 million. I'll cede all the rest of the inheritance to my brother. Still, the two of them continued to argue, so I continued. If this continues to escalate, I have been instructed by my brother to hire a lawyer to join the discussion. If it comes to that, I'm sure I'll inherit $25 million exactly. My husband and Naomi fell silent. Eventually, it seemed the two decided it was more profitable to settle for the $10 million worth of real estate. We finally agreed on the division of the inheritance. A few days later, I received the results of an investigation I had requested from a private investigator about Naomi. I immediately contacted my brother. After many twists and turns, the process of inheriting our father's estate was successfully completed. During the process, my brother Ken, from abroad, rushed to help. I inherited the family home and land, which was worth $10 million. My brother inherited the rest of the estate, which amounted to $90 million. Naomi and my husband were both in a good mood, with things progressing as they had hoped. After completing the inheritance proceedings, the four of us left the law office and returned to our father's house. While having a cup of tea in the living room, my brother began to speak, placing his smartphone on the table. Well done, everyone. Now that we've successfully inherited Dad's estate, there's something I want to talk about, he said with a smile. With that, he pulled a document from his pocket and spread it out on the table. The faces of my husband and Naomi turned pale upon reading the content. "It's a will" was the title written on the document. At the end of it was my father's signature and stamp. The date was about 5 years ago. This is a will that Dad entrusted to me when he was still working. It was created with 2 witnesses at a notary office. It's a legally valid will, my brother informed us. According to him, our father had drafted it before he had a stroke. His wife had already passed away, and in the event that something happened to him, he wanted to ensure his children would be properly provided for. The content of the will indicated that 1/4 of the total estate was to be left to Ken, who already had significant wealth, and 3/4 to Catherine, housewife. My father had made clear his intention not to change this will, and had explicitly stated in the will. If there's any change to this will, the reason for the change must be stated. Any will that does not include a reason for change is considered null and void. My father was really pushing himself at work. I think he was considering all sorts of things, like what would happen if he fell gravely ill or became senile. The estate was enormous, so he prepared early to prevent any conflicts among the remaining family members. My brother said, caressing the will. The will contained an addendum, stating, "I hope that there will be no conflicts over the inheritance and that the family will continue to live happily together." It was a will filled with my father's warm wishes for his family. I was touched to know that I was loved by my father just as much as my brother, and my heart swelled. On the other hand, my husband and Naomi next to me turned pale. "So, if you're going to change this will, the reason has to be stated, or else it's all null and void. Even if it's in my dad's handwriting. Maybe he was forced to write it when he was in a delirious state due to dementia." Suddenly, my husband slammed the table. With a ferocious expression, he glared at my brother and growled. "Hey, Ken, do you have any proof? Calling me a criminal. I never said you forged the will, did I, Robert?" He then looked at his wife, Naomi, sitting next to him. Naomi remained silent. I found it strange. Naomi informed me that my father had passed away and I was in the States for the funeral. After I returned abroad, apparently the topic of inheritance came up. But even though it concerned me, I wasn't informed of anything about it, my brother mentioned. He was looking at his wife, Naomi. Naomi still said nothing. "Quit your yapping. The inheritance is all settled, the $90 million is ours. It doesn't matter what you say now. What do you mean by ours? The one who inherited is me, my brother countered calmly. Shut up, my husband shouted back. The conversation was getting nowhere. I'm not sure what you mean, but the $90 million I inherited are just worthless paper, my brother said calmly. What? My husband retorted, surprised. My brother explained patiently. Our father's estate was worth $100 million. All of the assets, apart from real estate, were stocks in our father's own company. Back when my father was running the company, everything was smooth sailing and the stocks were soaring. But after he stepped down, the company continued to run in the red, and it seemed to be on the verge of bankruptcy in the 3 years before he passed away. The stocks that once had a value exceeding $90 million was now virtually worthless pieces of paper. But that can't be possible, can it? It's the truth. I inherited knowing that. I plan on restructuring my father's company, and since it had nothing to do with you, I didn't bother telling you. My husband seems rattled and mumbles to himself. He can't seem to come to terms with reality. It was then that Naomi spoke up for the first time. Hang on, just wait a minute. What do you mean by that? So you're saying I unknowingly inherited trash, while Catherine alone inherited $10 million? That's not fair. That's unfair. Beside the screaming Naomi, my brother sighed. Naomi, I inherited my father's estate. You weren't disadvantaged in any way. Is there any reason for you to be this angry? But I thought we were going to get all of that $100 million. I planned for so many things. Robert, my husband, glared sharply at the flustered Naomi. So you conspired with Robert, thinking you were going to get all of my father's money. And while you were at it, you were having an affair, weren't you? Naomi and her husband fell silent as if frozen in place. Why? Naomi muttered in a raspy voice. Glancing at her, my brother continued. After our phone call, my brother started to suspect Naomi. Why didn't she talk to me about the inheritance? Why had her interactions with me been so curt lately, and why had she started ignoring my calls? I had my suspicions, and after seeing her post on social media, I was certain she was having an affair. Pretty soon, I'm going to come into a lot of money. I'll be living the life of a celebrity. I've been talking it over with my babe about how to spend it. He told me we're going to have so much fun once the money comes in. I'm so happy. I don't remember having that conversation with you, Naomi. I wonder who this babe of yours might be. No. You've got it all wrong. This isn't. Ignoring his flustered wife, my brother pulled out a large envelope. He took out several photos from the envelope and lined them up next to the will. They were pictures of Naomi and Robert going into a hotel with their arms entwined. The close relationship between the two was clear. I've been abroad, you know. I hired a private detective to investigate because I was curious about your babe. Presented with undeniable evidence, Naomi started to shake. Looking at Naomi's affair partner, my husband, I saw that he was boiling red with anger, a stark contrast to the pale Naomi. Damn you, snooping around like a stalker. What the hell is all this? With your ridiculous will and these photos. What a joke. Stop! Suddenly, Naomi raised her voice. She approached my brother in a seductive voice, like a bad actress. Hey, you're wrong, it's all a misunderstanding. It's all Robert's doing. He convinced me that if I listened to him, I'd get all of your dad's inheritance. Hey, wouldn't you be happy to receive $100 million? I thought it was for your benefit. My husband, who had been easily betrayed, stared at Naomi with his mouth wide open. This picture, we were just messing around. You were always overseas, and I was lonely. You're also to blame, aren't you? Hey, forgive me. The $90 million is no good anymore, but let's take the $10 million from Catherine's real estate. Did you forge the will? Huh? Of course not. Robert did it. He said it was easy and had it written by your father. See, I'm not at fault. When the matter of the forged will was revealed, my husband flew into a rage and lunged at Naomi, but my brother quickly intervened. "You bastards! You don't have any evidence. You all will regret this in hell." As he ranted and kicked a chair, my brother coolly watched and slowly took out his phone. "Oh, it seems my phone was on record mode. It's been recording everything since we came home. That was a careless mistake." The husband and Naomi turned pale and fell silent. "Also, I didn't mention it, but this room has surveillance cameras that record everything. I installed them because of Dad's severe dementia, just in case something happened to him." What a coincidence. In the silent living room, only my brother kept talking. "Falsifying a will is a crime. Your earlier outburst at us could be considered a threat, punishable by law. There's a police station nearby, and they would be here quickly if we report it. But then again, since the inheritance issue has been settled and if you swear not to touch Catherine's stuff in the future, maybe there's no need to report. What do you think?" As he said this, my brother started operating his phone. I might as well send this voice recording to my computer overseas. Having been silently observing the exchange until now, I pulled out a document from my bag and thrust it at my husband. "Robert, I want a divorce." Whoa, hold on, reconsider this. "I'm sorry. We've been together for years, haven't we? Who do you think has been providing for you all this time? I've had enough. Stop with the excuses and just agree to the divorce. If not, I'm calling the police." I clenched my smartphone with a look of grim determination. Robert drooped his shoulders and nodded. "Naomi, our relationship is over. Once I received the money, you were planning to take it and be with Ken, weren't you? I heard the records of your exchanges with Ken from a private investigator." Naomi hung her head, covering her face with her hands. Afterwards, both my brother and I got divorced. Following the divorce, Robert left the house. The inheritance that he thought he'd acquired was not only worthless, but Naomi also spilled the beans about the forgery of the will. Everything that happened in the living room was also fully recorded. Robert must have been livid, but there was nothing he could do about it. The surveillance camera in the living room was originally installed for my father's care, but it also served the purpose of collecting evidence of Robert's emotional abuse. Even if I acquired my father's inheritance, I was planning to submit it as evidence in a divorce trial if Robert refused to divorce. When I told my brother about this, he suggested we use that camera as well. After the divorce, Robert lost his job due to rumors of his affair spreading in the workplace. It seems his colleagues had spotted him going in and out of hotels with a woman who was not his wife. Robert's parents had already passed away, and with the loss of his job and home, he disappeared. I had been requesting a share of his assets, but I didn't want to be involved with Robert anymore, especially after having inherited some wealth. Naomi, the woman Robert cheated with, also lost everything just like him. She had been insisting, "I don't want to break up. Don't leave me," during the divorce proceedings with my brother Ken, but the divorce was finalized when solid evidence was presented at the mediation. Naomi had been splurging money while Robert was not around, and she was billed for all of it, leaving her penniless. Since she had not been working from the start, and like Robert, didn't have a home to return to, she's now scraping by in a dilapidated public housing project, living off welfare. My brother Ken is still working overseas, but he has put up the house where he lived with Naomi for sale, and he will be moving in with me in the house that our father left us. I've always lived frugally, but my life has become stable since my brother started contributing to the living expenses. The value of the land my father left me has been increasing year by year, and now it's easily worth over $100 million. I've been freed from caring for my dad and from the emotional abuse from my husband, and now I'm living a relaxed life. With time to myself and now living alone in a large house, I started to think about how I could utilize it. Around that time, I saw a TV program about foreign exchange students doing homestays, and I thought, that's it. I decided to start a room rental service in my spare rooms. I'm offering rooms at a low cost to college students and exchange students, and now I live a lively life with them. We all eat meals together, play games, and help each other with assignments. We live together happily, almost like a family. On other days when I have some free time, I also do activities like reading storybooks at the local public library. I don't have any children of my own, and my husband and I had grown apart. After losing my beloved father, I was always worried about how lonely I would be, but now my days are unbelievably lively and vibrant. Even at my age, it's so rewarding to connect with young people and make even a small contribution to society. There have been many things in my life that were so hard, I wanted to run away. But now, I'm loosely connected with my brother, my roommates, and people in my community, and I'm living fulfilling days. Every day, I savor the modest happiness I've finally achieved.